Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Hello and welcome to the Success in Africa podcast episode 59. My name is Dr. Modupe Taylor Pierce and I am a scholar and practitioner of leadership and organizational development. Simply put, I study what makes people successful. I have been studying this for 3 decades with a particular focus on people in Africa, and in this podcast, I will share stories, lessons, and insights about people having success in Africa. I created this podcast because I have a vision for Africa. I have a vision of Africa becoming a middle-income continent by 2030. That's just 5 years from now, and a high-income continent by 2040. And for that to happen, I need you and every other African watching or listening to this podcast to become successful. So, if you want to be successful in Africa, I encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast. This episode is brought to you courtesy of BCA Online, the one-stop shop for mastering leadership. Joining BCA Online is free and it gives you access to countless hours of knowledge, videos, and a plethora of information about leadership that will enhance your leadership capacity. And also, if you have questions that you want me to answer after watching this video, just log on to BCA Online. The link is on the screen and post your questions there. That is where I will respond to your questions. At the height of the COVID crisis, one of the major difficulties that African governments and public health officials had was access to COVID testing equipment. Simply testing for COVID was an expensive exercise, and many African governments depended almost totally on foreign aid through NGOs, including the World Health Organization, to donate these COVID testing kits. The first locally manufactured COVID-19 antigen test in Africa was created in South Africa by a company called Medical Diagnostic. The home test kit, which is called the Health Pulse Test Now, gives results in 15 minutes and costs 35% less than the imported alternatives. Medical Diagnostic is a company founded by Ashley Uys, whom I refer to as Hustler-in-Chief. Because as you will note when I share his story with you, hustling is one of Ashley's superpowers. Ashley grew up in an area called Cape Flats, outside Cape Town, South Africa. And this area, frankly, is more known for producing gangsters than it is for producing entrepreneurs or scientists. Despite growing up in very modest circumstances as the eldest of 6 children, born to a father who worked in the construction industry, Ashley did not let his circumstances determine his destiny. His father had a lot to do with his mindset because he encouraged the young Ashley to read newspapers, and he taught him that education and skills would be his ticket out of poverty. During school holidays, Ashley's dad would take him along to construction sites where he worked and let the young Ashley work there for extra money. He taught him how to use power tools. In fact, Ashley used his savings as a teenager to buy a welder and a grinder so that he could make gates and burglar bars as a small commercial business. Yes, the young Ashley was already thinking entrepreneurship as a teenager. He also worked hard in his academics and received a partial scholarship to attend the University of Western Cape, or UWC, where he studied biotechnology. After graduation, he started working for the university, but frankly was more passionate about industry than academics and research. His life changed when he was accepted into a business incubator program that offered scholarships for scientists from universities. Ashley was one of 13 shortlisted candidates, and he benefited massively from the course. It was like a mini MBA program. And it taught him many of the fundamentals of how to run a business, including areas like marketing, business administration, and financial management. As part of this program, and it had an internship that accompanied it, Ashley wrote a business plan for starting his own company. And after completing the program, he found a co-founder to start the company with him. And together they launched this company, which was called World Diagnostics. The business of World Diagnostics would be to design and produce diagnostic test kits. Unfortunately, World Diagnostics did not make a single sale in its first year because there wasn't a ready market for its services. Ashley's partner withdrew from the partnership, and Ashley found himself staring into the face of business failure. He realized at that point that it was time to hustle. So he stopped focusing on the products and services that he and his partner had cooked up in their desk laboratory and opened his eyes and his ears to listen to the market to find out what was needed. At that time, there was an epidemic of an illegal methamphetamine drug going on in Cape Flats, and Ashley realized that there was a need for a rapid testing kit for this drug. He found one made by a supplier in the USA, reached out to the supplier, and started negotiating to become their distributor in South Africa. While he was in the midst of the negotiations, he then continued his hustle. He approached a large pharmaceutical retail group in South Africa, I think it was Alpha Pharm, and he pitched to them the idea of carrying his new product. Initially, he was trying to pitch, he was getting rebuffed, but Ashley did not stop attempting. He kept persisting to get a meeting with them, and eventually, he was given 10 minutes during their lunch break at a management meeting to make his pitch. Oh, he made that 10 minutes count. He pitched to this group, focusing on his personal story about growing up in a gangster neighborhood and the effect of the illegal drugs on this neighborhood. He convinced this pharmacy retail group to carry this product as part of their corporate social responsibility, for which they would get a small tax break that would count in their favor. Guess what? Alpha Pharm, this retail group, awarded him a national contract to distribute the kit. The hustler was finally in business. Ashley negotiated payment terms with Alpha Pharm that was very favorable in his favor for them to pay him quickly, and then negotiated terms with the American supplier to get long payment terms so that he had a positive cash flow float between his receivables and his payables, or between his supplier and his customer. This way, he was able to bring the product into SA, sell it, collect his money, and then pay off his supplier. So in case you're wondering, where did he get his initial capital from? He didn't have initial capital. He used his brains and his hustle. Ashley used this model to grow his business into additional products, focusing exclusively on products that were in demand from the market. Eventually, he made enough capital to be able to consider manufacturing his product in South Africa. He went back to the university where he had worked, and he asked for lab space. His good relationships with his university professors helped him to negotiate favorable terms for them to help him to create the good test kits. He focused his development on test kits for two ailments that he knew were in great demand: malaria and drug abuse. He was able to make these at a cost that was cheaper than the imported version and comparable in terms of reliability and accuracy. Once he had that, he then rented a factory space and negotiated with his first customer for the customer to finance the cost of the input materials so that he could provide the kits to them at a cheaper price and thus finance the scaling up of his production. You see, Ashley understood the hustle. He approached the customer from the perspective of what would create value for the customer. The customer wanted to be able to have test kits that were not only just as reliable as the ones that were imported, but also priced a little better and made in South Africa. Because of this additional value, the customer was then willing to front part of the costs. All through this exercise, Ashley was also very conscious about keeping his fixed costs very low. He leveraged the university for talent and for tools until he had closed on his customer for the homemade malaria kits. He hired his own employees only after he was sure he had the order and the cash flow was coming in. Before you know it, Ashley's company and the manufacturing had grown from 1 employee to over 40 employees. And he expanded his business from 1 company to 3. Today, Ashley has 3 companies. The real World Diagnostics is the distribution company. That's the first one that he formed. Then the Medical Diagnostic is the production or manufacturing company. Notice how he started first by getting the sale. He got the customer before he got into manufacturing and spending a lot of money. This is a lesson that I've shared before with other entrepreneurs. Sales matters. The third company is a company called Oculus ID, and this one is also quite innovative. It produces non-invasive testing services, specifically testing applications that use smartphone technology to test for the presence of drugs. Along the way, Ashley has learned some valuable lessons about how to do business. First, he learned to leverage the talent of competent professionals and never to skimp on acquiring this best talent. Second, he learned that in order to get what you want, you have to be willing to ask for it and to ask continually for it, because luck does not come to those who sit and wait, but to those who have the courage and the persistence to go out and get what they need. Thirdly, he also learned that nobody cares about how good your product or service is unless it is a product or service that is needed. And therefore, focus your energies, as he did, on analyzing the market continually to assess what is needed, not what you think the market ought to get, but what the market wants, and have the courage to pivot from whatever you are doing, just as Ashley did, to what the market needs you to be doing or making, just as Ashley did. It is this third lesson that led to Ashley's company becoming the first to create a rapid testing kit for COVID, because he recognized that there was going to be a massive demand for this. And while the epidemic was on, Ashley and his team were in hazmat suits, searching for COVID patients to draw samples from so that they could research and develop test kits. Think about that. While everybody else was running as far as they could from COVID patients, Ashley was searching for them and walking towards them. Like a good entrepreneur, his instinct was not to run away from problems, but to recognize that in every problem lies an opportunity, and he made it his business to search out and solve problems. That is why Ashley Uys is one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in South Africa today. We've come to the end of today's podcast, today's episode. I do hope you have learned a bit more about becoming a successful entrepreneur in Africa. Remember, anytime you hear your friends, your colleagues, or your family complain about the problems in Africa, they are pointing you to the opportunities to make a difference and possibly create a business. Don't run away from the problems. Run to them. Solve them. That's where your success lies. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like the video. Tell your friends about it, because together we can transform our beloved continent of Africa. I'll see you next week.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.